Former CIA guy Mike Baker joins me. Mike, are Maduro's top officials suitable for governing Venezuela in the long term? Because right now, we're hearing there's a manhunt inside the country going after anybody who supported the Maduro takedown.
Yeah, look, I would change the wording of that assessment to say that it would be easier to have the Maduro regime cronies in charge. I would not say it would be better. It's certainly not better for the Venezuelan people. Look, if what happens as a result of the Maduro capture is simply a reshuffling of some of the key positions, using the same people who have enriched themselves in the same way that Maduro has and have been responsible for crushing dissent over the years and putting down the opposition, then I think the Venezuelan people themselves are going to say, well, what was this all about?
Well, Trump says he's not going to tolerate what I would call misbehavior on the part of the new authorities in Caracas. Can you see him taking out a couple of leaders the way he took out Maduro?
I think that would be extremely complicated and messy. Look, the operation that took down Maduro, from just an operational perspective, everyone can argue about the morality of it or the constitutionality of it. I'm just talking about the operational aspects of it. That was a very, very well done operation by incredibly capable people, both within the intel community and obviously the U.S. military. But if they haven't set the table for what happens next, right? If there haven't been backroom discussions with people like Delcy Rodriguez, who's now the newly named president, who was the vice president of Maduro, was previously a foreign minister, worked closely with Hugo Chavez. If they haven't had some conversations or negotiations with people like that, or her brother Jorge, who runs basically propaganda for the state, or Cabello, or any of these individuals to say, this is what is going to happen. After we take out Maduro, I mean, should he leave, we're going to have a transition of power. Now, if that's left open-ended, or they haven't even had negotiations in some sort of backroom deal, and what they're saying is, it's easier to keep these people in place, let them kind of see, let's see whether they work with us. And then at some point, maybe we'll bring in the legitimate government, the opposition, who have been in exile, including Edmundo Gonzalez, Maria Machado, those individuals. Then we've got a problem, I think.
All right. Very interesting story surfacing here. Iran's leaders are struggling to end protests, and they're growing more anxious after the U.S. took action in Venezuela. Okay. Iran's supreme leader, Khomeini, reportedly plans to flee to Moscow if the country's regime collapses. That's from a report in the Times of London. Does that sound realistic? Khomeini flees to Moscow?
Well, I think it sounds pragmatic on their part. If, in fact, what they've come up with is okay, what's our escape plan or what's our exile plan? They're facing protests that look and feel and seem different than what we've seen in the past, whether it was 2019, 2022. Anytime there's been protests in the past that have flared up and then quickly fizzled out because the regime there, the mullahs, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, have been so repressive and so good at crushing that protest. This one feels different. It is touching a very broad swath of the population of Iran because the inflation is crushing them. The mismanagement and corruption has driven that economy into the ground. Sanctions obviously have played a role. And they've got other issues. They've got a water scarcity problem that's incredible. They turn the tap on, they don't get water, they don't have power. The people may at this point think we have nothing else to lose.
Yeah, and so Khomeini probably has to go. Wow, fascinating stuff. Mike Baker, good stuff. Thanks for joining us. See you again real soon. Thank you, Mike.